When I first heard whispers about a supposed leaked script surrounding Secret Wars and the potential return of Iron Man, my mind immediately began racing. Not only because Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark is the heart of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for so many of us, but also because of what that return could mean if Marvel actually decides to play this card. I'm not talking about some quick cameo or a flashback to remind us of his sacrifice in Endgame. What I'm talking about here is something on a much larger universe-defining scale. Something that ties together multiversal mechanics, incursions, and one of the most dangerous villains Marvel has yet to properly introduce on screen, Dr. Doom. Welcome back to MovieCast. I'm Liam Harrison, your host, and today I want to take you through a theory that I think could genuinely change how fans see both Tony Stark and the future of the Avengers. Now, I'll be upfront. This is a theory breakdown based on information floating around, some leaks that may or may not hold weight, and a lot of connective tissue I've pieced together myself from what Marvel has already shown us. So if you're here for that kind of in-depth speculation where I break down the how and the why step by step, then you're in the right place. So let's dive straight into it. The idea that not only will Iron Man return in Secret Wars, but he will face off against none other than Dr. Doom, with both characters being played by Robert Downey Jr. Imagine that. The same actor embodying two polar opposites. On one side, the hero who sacrificed everything to save the universe, and on the other, a version of Doom driven by grief, vengeance, and raw ambition. For me, that's not just epic fan service, it's also thematically rich storytelling. The foundation of this theory starts with what happened in Avengers Endgame. We know Steve Rogers went back in time to return the Infinity Stones. That's canon. But what isn't fully shown on screen is all the little interactions Steve may have had during that trip. We're told he fixed the timeline and prevented branches from forming. But the MCU has been very careful in showing us that time travel and multiversal rules are rarely clean-cut. The TVA in Loki showed us how fragile timelines are and how one small deviation can spiral into an entirely new reality. So the idea that Steve met with Tony during his travels, that's not far-fetched. In fact, the leaks suggest Steve did cross paths with Tony in the past, and in doing so, actually influenced him, subtly nudging Tony to make decisions that avoided catastrophic branches. That alone opens up so many possibilities. Now here's where things start getting really interesting. Steve choosing to live with Peggy Carter isn't just a bittersweet ending, it's an incursion waiting to happen. If we look at what Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness taught us, incursions happen when universes collide, often triggered by choices that defy the natural flow of time. Steve's decision to live out a life that wasn't originally his, that action potentially sets off a chain reaction that destroys another universe. And according to this theory, the one who pays the heaviest price for that decision is none other than Dr. Doom. Picture this. In an alternate reality, Doom isn't just the tyrant we know from the comics. He's a husband and a father. He has a family, Sue and Franklin. And unlike the Fantastic Four version we might expect, this is a Doom who found love and purpose outside of conquest. But because of Steve's incursion, that reality collapses. Sue and Franklin die. Doom loses everything. Not because of his own hubris or mistakes, but because of Captain America's choice to rewrite his own destiny. That right there is storytelling gold. Doom's motivation wouldn't just be power, it would be grief, loss, and vengeance directed at the man he blames for destroying his world, Steve Rogers. Now imagine this chilling scene. Steve, living his quiet life with Peggy, finally free from war and duty, finally dancing in the home he always dreamed of. Then, out of nowhere, Doom arrives. He doesn't come as a conqueror with armies. He comes as a broken man turned monster, seeking retribution. He doesn't just threaten Steve, he kills him. Brutally. That moment isn't just tragic. It's the spark that lights the fire of Avengers Doomsday. So where does Iron Man fit into this picture? This is where things get truly wild. Because while Doom is hunting Steve and tearing into the Avengers, another version of Tony Stark's superior Iron Man emerges from the multiverse. This isn't the selfless Tony we saw in Endgame. This is the Tony who kept the Ultron program alive, who leaned into his darker instincts, who embraced the godlike power of the Infinity Stones or other cosmic tools without the restraint of morality. In other words, a Tony who embodies everything our Tony fought against becoming. And yet, he's the one who might hold the key to defeating Doom. The leaked idea suggests that in Secret Wars, we're heading toward a scenario where it's Robert Downey Jr. versus Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man versus Dr. Doom. That's not just a battle of fists and armor. That's a battle of ideologies, grief, and identity. Because if you think about it, both men are geniuses. Both are defined by loss. Both crave control. The difference is that Tony, in our timeline, found redemption through sacrifice. Doom, however, was shattered by fate and turned inward toward destruction. Having Downey portray both sides of that coin, that's the kind of theatrical symmetry Marvel would absolutely love to put on screen. But let's slow down for a second, because I know some of you might be wondering, how does this actually connect back to the mechanics of Secret Wars and the Battle World storyline? After all, that event is famous in the comics for collapsing multiple universes into one battleground controlled by Doom himself. And here's where the puzzle pieces start fitting together. If incursions are already happening because of Steve and others, the multiverse is collapsing. Realities are bleeding into one another. Eventually, a battle world is formed. A patchwork universe stitched together from the remains of countless destroyed realities. Doom, in this theory, is at the center of it all, wielding godlike power not just as a tyrant, but as a man trying to rebuild what he lost. And here's the kicker. Superior Iron Man sees Battleworld not just as a problem, but as an opportunity. He believes he can outwit Doom, out-engineer him, and maybe even replace him as the ultimate authority in this stitched-together reality. But in doing so, he clashes not only with Doom, but with the legacy of the Tony Stark we already knew and loved. That's why his presence matters so much. He's not just another variant. He's a reflection of the path Tony could have taken if not for Steve, if not for Pepper, if not for the Avengers pulling him back from his darkest impulses. So to recap where we are so far, Steve's time travel choices create an incursion that destroys Doom's family, sparking Doom's crusade against him. Doom kills Steve during Avengers Doomsday, leaving the Avengers fractured and desperate. Then, as Secret Wars unfolds, a superior Iron Man enters the fray, setting up the ultimate showdown, Iron Man versus Doom, both portrayed by Robert Downey Jr. And in this collision, not only is the fate of the multiverse at stake, but also the legacy of Tony Stark himself. That, to me, is the kind of storytelling that Marvel thrives on. It's big, it's emotional, and it ties together the past, present, and future of the MCU in one sweeping arc. And honestly, if you think about the weight of Tony's sacrifice in Endgame, what better way to honor it than by showing us the version of him who never made that choice, who never grew into the hero we admired, and then putting him face to face with the consequences. That's what I think makes this theory so powerful. It's not just about bringing Tony back for cheap fan service. It's about challenging us as fans to see who Tony could have been and why the version we lost mattered so much. When I think about the fallout of Steve's death at the hands of Dr. Doom, the first thing that comes to mind is the ripple effect it would have across the entire Avengers roster. Steve was always the moral anchor of the team. Even when he wasn't the one leading the charge, his presence gave everyone else a sense of direction. Losing him in such a brutal and personal way doesn't just create grief, it creates fear, guilt, and division. The Avengers have faced losses before, but this would feel different. This wouldn't be an enemy they underestimated or a cosmic being too powerful to contain. This would be a calculated act of vengeance by one man who holds them directly responsible. That sort of wound cuts deeper because it isn't about being overpowered, it's about being punished. And for Doom to take out Steve in his own home, in the very life he fought to reclaim, that makes it a scar that can't easily be healed. I imagine the Avengers reeling from this moment and immediately starting to fracture. Some would blame themselves. Some would blame Steve for creating the incursion in the first place. Others would fixate on Doom as a threat unlike any they've ever faced. The tricky part is, Doom isn't Thanos. He doesn't come with armies of faceless soldiers, and he doesn't make his intentions entirely clear from the start. Instead, he arrives with precision and fury. He doesn't need an infinity gauntlet. His genius and sheer willpower are his weapons. And because of that, he's even harder to stop. He doesn't telegraph his every move, which makes him unpredictable. The Avengers aren't used to fighting someone who plays chess at their level, someone who can match them not just in strength, but in intellect. And if you've read the comics, you know Doom has a knack for manipulating situations so that even when you think you're winning, you're already in his trap. This sets the stage for what's being described as Avengers Doomsday. Unlike Infinity War or Endgame, where the heroes knew they were racing against a ticking clock, here it's Doom controlling the tempo. He's not trying to wipe out half the universe. He's trying to punish, dismantle, and reshape reality itself. And with Steve gone, the Avengers lack the unity to mount a coordinated response. Thor, still reeling from the destruction of Asgard and his own personal failures, might spiral further. Wanda, if she's alive or resurrected in this timeline, would see Doom's grief and vengeance as a twisted mirror of her own pain, perhaps even sympathizing with him at first. And then there's Strange, who would be forced to admit that his warnings about incursions were right all along, but he never anticipated how personal the consequences would become. This creates fertile ground for conflict within the team, and Doom thrives on exploiting division. Now here's where Superior Iron Man enters the picture. The Avengers, desperate and leaderless, suddenly come face to face with a variant of Tony Stark who embodies everything their Tony warned against. Imagine that meeting. They see his face, they hear his voice. But the man standing in front of them isn't their friend. He's colder, sharper, unburdened by guilt or humility. And yet he brings something they desperately need, knowledge. Superior Iron Man understands Doom. He's the kind of mind who would have taken the same steps if pushed far enough. He knows the shortcuts Doom will take, the flaws in his armor, the ways he manipulates reality to bend in his favor. But the Avengers are torn. Do they trust this Tony, knowing full well he could betray them at any moment? Or do they refuse his help and risk being obliterated by Doom's wrath? That moral dilemma is what makes his arrival so fascinating to me. It's not just about the spectacle of seeing Downey back, it's about the question of whether they can stomach fighting alongside a Tony they don't recognize. This also deepens the thematic core of the story. Superior Iron Man, unlike our Tony, never made peace with his mortality. He never sacrificed himself in Endgame. Instead, he weaponized his brilliance and technology to insulate himself from death, weakness, and loss. He built himself into something untouchable. He believes he's the logical endpoint of Tony Stark's evolution, perfection through control. That ideology puts him directly at odds with Doom, who sees himself as the only rightful savior of a broken multiverse. On one side, you have Doom motivated by grief and vengeance. On the other, you have Superior Iron Man motivated by ambition and the conviction that only he can fix things. And caught in the middle are the Avengers, torn between these two godlike figures who both wear the face of Robert Downey Jr. That dynamic alone is enough to carry an entire film, but in the context of Secret Wars, it escalates into something even bigger. Let's not forget the mechanics of the multiverse itself. With incursions collapsing entire realities, the multiverse doesn't just shrink, it becomes unstable. That instability gives rise to Battleworld, a chaotic patchwork where pieces of dead universes are stitched together. In this environment, Doom isn't just a genius in a suit, he becomes something closer to a god. In the comics, he wields the power of the Beyonders to create and control Battleworld. Translating that to the MCU, I could see Doom harnessing the energy of incursions themselves, bending the fabric of reality to his will. He doesn't just conquer universes, he rebuilds them in his own image. And within this Frankenstein-like world, the Avengers find themselves fighting not just Doom, but the remnants of realities where everything is slightly twisted. Dead heroes, alternate villains, landscapes that defy physics, this becomes the arena of Secret Wars. Here's the catch though. Superior Iron Man doesn't see Battleworld as a nightmare. He sees it as proof that the multiverse needs a singular guiding hand. And who better than him? He genuinely believes he can wrest control from Doom and run Battleworld the way it should be run. Efficiently, logically, and with no compromises. This makes him a dangerous ally for the Avengers because even if he helps them defeat Doom, they know he has his own endgame in mind. That's the beauty of this setup. It's not a straightforward heroes versus villains conflict. It's a layered struggle where every side believes they're right, and every choice the Avengers make risks creating an even worse outcome. So as I see it, the second act builds toward this uneasy alliance. The Avengers reluctantly accept Superior Iron Man's help, knowing full well they can't match Doom's intellect without him. But every interaction with this Tony is laced with tension. He mocks their failures. He points out how weak they've become without Steve and their original Tony. He reminds them that their Tony's sacrifice, while noble, ultimately solved nothing because Doom is here, incursions are happening, and the multiverse is falling apart. That bitterness stings because deep down the Avengers fear he might be right. And yet, they cling to the hope that the Tony they knew made the better choice, even if it cost him everything. This is where the emotional weight really ramps up. Because for the audience, seeing Downey in dual roles, one as Doom, fueled by grief, and the other as Superior Iron Man, fueled by arrogance, creates a tension we can't look away from. We're forced to confront the idea that Tony's story never truly ended with Endgame. His choices reverberate across the multiverse, and now, in the most twisted of ways, he's both the villain and the potential savior. That duality is what makes Secret Wars more than just another big crossover event. It's a meditation on legacy, on the cost of choices, and on the versions of ourselves we could become if we took one step down the wrong path. As the multiverse continues to collapse and Battleworld takes shape, I picture the Avengers stepping into a reality that feels like both a nightmare and a strange reflection of everything they've lost. What makes this part of the story so gripping is that Battleworld isn't a battlefield in the traditional sense. It's a patchwork quilt of broken universes stitched together in impossible ways. One section might resemble New York City frozen in time after Loki's invasion. Another might look like an Asgard that never fell, and yet another might be an apocalyptic wasteland where Ultron actually won. Everywhere the Avengers look, they're confronted with versions of events that went differently, versions that sometimes show victories they never achieved or horrors they barely managed to avoid. And in the center of this disorienting chaos sits Dr. Doom, not merely ruling but reshaping reality as he sees fit, using his grief as justification for molding existence into something under his complete control. For the Avengers, navigating this environment is disorienting on every level. They aren't just fighting enemies, they're facing ghosts of themselves. Imagine Thor encountering an alternate version of Loki who never sought redemption, a Loki who rules with an iron fist. Or Wanda seeing a universe where her children actually survived, tempting her with the life she always wanted. These encounters aren't just distractions, they're traps Doom deliberately leaves in place to destabilize his enemies. He understands that their strength comes not just from their powers, but from their unity. And if he can erode their willpower by forcing them to confront versions of their deepest desires or regrets, then he can break them long before the final confrontation. And that's exactly what Battleworld is designed to do. It's not just a multiverse battleground, it's Doom's psychological weapon. This is where superior Iron Man starts to truly flex his influence. Unlike the Avengers, he isn't fazed by Battleworld. He sees the patchwork chaos not as a curse but as an opportunity. While others are haunted by visions of what might have been, he analyzes them coldly, taking notes, calculating weaknesses, and mapping out how these fractured universes can be used to his advantage. To him, Doom's creation is less of a horror and more of a challenge, like a puzzle only he is brilliant enough to solve. And I think that's what makes this version of Tony so chilling. Our Tony would have looked at Battleworld and seen lives in need of saving. Superior Iron Man looks at Battleworld and sees resources, tools, and weapons. That ruthless pragmatism immediately puts him at odds with the Avengers, because while they're trying to hold on to their humanity, he's already treating the multiverse like a chessboard. The tension between superior Iron Man and the Avengers deepens during this act, and I think that's intentional. Marvel doesn't want us to be comfortable with this alliance. They want us second-guessing his motives every step of the way. He might save them from a trap one moment, then turn around and criticize their weakness the next. He might share intel that helps them survive, but he'll always remind them that they wouldn't stand a chance without him. And the scariest part? He's right. Every time the Avengers confront Doom's tricks, it's superior Iron Man who has the foresight to predict what Doom is doing and the technological firepower to counter it. That dependency gnaws at the team, because they're forced to admit that the only reason they're still alive is because they're leaning on a version of Tony Stark they don't trust. That dynamic creates a fascinating parallel to Infinity War, where the team desperately needed Tony's vision to stop Thanos. But here, the Tony they need isn't someone they can rally behind, it's someone they fear. But even superior Iron Man isn't immune to Doom's manipulations. That's the beauty of Battleworld. Doom doesn't need to defeat you outright, he just needs to show you what you're most vulnerable to. For superior Iron Man, that weakness is validation. Deep down, he wants to prove he's right. He wants to prove he's the Tony Stark who made the correct choices, unlike the one who died in Endgame. So Doom plays into that, setting traps not just for the Avengers, but specifically for superior Iron Man, feeding his ego and planting the idea that maybe the two of them aren't enemies after all. Maybe they're equals. Maybe they're the only ones capable of shaping reality. That temptation becomes the ticking time bomb of this act, because as much as superior Iron Man positions himself as the Avengers' reluctant ally, he could easily pivot into becoming their greatest threat. This is also where I think the emotional stakes get really heavy. Imagine the Avengers, already struggling with Steve's death, watching a man who wears Tony's face slowly inch closer to Doom's philosophy. It's almost like losing Tony all over again, but this time in a slower, more agonizing way. They see flashes of the man they loved, the quick wit, the genius ideas, but warped into something unrecognizable. It forces them to confront the idea that the Tony they lost in Endgame wasn't just unique, he was irreplaceable. No variant, no matter how similar, can ever be the same. And that realization fuels their determination not just to fight Doom, but to stop superior Iron Man from becoming the next Doom. That's a tragic but powerful arc, Because it's not about saving the multiverse in a general sense, it's about fighting to preserve the legacy of the man who defined them as heroes. By the end of this act, I see the Avengers at a breaking point. They've barely survived the first waves of Doom's battle world traps. They've lost allies along the way, maybe alternate versions of characters who joined their cause only to be cut down. They're bruised, broken, and distrustful of one another. And looming over all of it is the growing shadow of Superior Iron Man, who continues to assert himself as the only one capable of ending Doom. The Avengers are faced with a terrifying choice. Do they fully commit to his leadership, risking the possibility that they're handing power over to someone just as dangerous as Doom? Or do they resist him, knowing they might not stand a chance without him? That's the cliff the third act leaves us on. The Avengers stranded in a collapsing multiverse, surrounded by ghosts of their past, forced to align with a Tony Stark who may very well betray them, and staring down the reality that the final battle will be Tony versus Tony, Doom versus Superior Iron Man. At this point in the story, the Avengers are standing on the razor's edge. They're trapped within Battle World. Reality itself is hanging by a thread, and the only strategy left to them feels like gambling with fire. Doom has proven himself unstoppable in every direct confrontation, not just because of his power, but because he manipulates every encounter into a test of loyalty, morality, or desire. The Avengers are barely keeping themselves together, and all the while, Superior Iron Man is pressing harder and harder for control. He insists that the only way to win isn't through unity or sacrifice, but through absolute dominance. And here's where I think the real drama of this act comes in. The Avengers know they need his genius, but they also know that once the battle with Doom is over, Superior Iron Man could very well become the next tyrant they'll have to face. That tension makes every decision fraught with risk, every alliance razor thin. What fascinates me most about this stage is how the thematic lines blur between Doom and Superior Iron Man. On paper, they should be natural enemies. Doom blames the Avengers for his loss, while Superior Iron Man wants to outsmart him and claim control of Battle World. But when you strip away their methods, their ideologies start to look disturbingly similar. Both believe the multiverse can only be saved if it's placed under their singular control. Both are fueled by trauma, Doom by the destruction of his family, Superior Iron Man by the conviction that the Tony Stark who sacrificed himself was weak. And in a twisted way, Doom sees this in Superior Iron Man and begins to treat him almost like a kindred spirit. I can imagine a chilling exchange where Doom tells him, "You are what your universe should have allowed you to become." That's a seed planted right in Superior Iron Man's ego, and it grows throughout this act. Meanwhile, the Avengers are dealing with their own fractures. Without Steve, their moral compass is gone, and even characters like Strange or Thor can't provide the same steady leadership. Strange is consumed with guilt over not preventing the incursions earlier. Thor is haunted by failures across countless universes, and Wanda, if she's alive or drawn back through multiversal threads, is dangerously tempted by the alternate realities Doom dangles in front of her. These distractions aren't accidents. They're Doom's calculated moves to keep them vulnerable. The only thing that holds them together at all is their shared distrust of Superior Iron Man. They don't like him, they don't trust him, but he's the glue forcing them to stay aligned. Because if they turn on him now, Doom wins outright. And that's the cruel irony. Tony Stark, in his darkest form, is the one keeping Earth's mightiest heroes from completely collapsing. As this act builds, we start to see Superior Iron Man stepping into his inevitable confrontation with Doom. It doesn't begin as a battle of armor and weapons. It begins as a battle of ideology. The two men debate in the ruins of collapsing universes, both claiming to be the rightful savior of reality. Doom argues that only through his grief-driven will can order emerge from chaos. Superior Iron Man counters that grief is weakness, and that true control comes from foresight and intellect. Their words are as cutting as any physical attack, and for a moment, you can see how similar they really are. The Avengers, forced to watch, realize with horror that this is the fight their future hinges on, not just who wins, but what that victory will mean for everything that comes after. If Doom wins, reality is reshaped in the image of his vengeance. If Superior Iron Man wins, reality is reshaped in the image of his ambition. Either way, the Avengers risk losing everything. Of course, the debate doesn't stay philosophical for long. Doom, unwilling to be challenged, unleashes his godlike powers, warping Battleworld itself into a weapon. Mountains shift, skies burn, and alternate armies rise from the rubble, twisted versions of the Avengers, resurrected as Doom's pawns. It's his way of forcing the team to fight not just him, but the ghosts of who they once were. And it works. The Avengers are forced into battle against alternate versions of themselves, an echo of Endgame's Avengers Assemble, but darker, crueler, and more personal. Superior Iron Man, however, thrives in this chaos. His suit, enhanced with tech from dozens of realities, allows him to dismantle Doom's armies with brutal efficiency. To the Avengers, it's both awe-inspiring and terrifying. They've never seen Tony like this, and the more they watch, the more they realize that this version of him might actually be able to win, but at a cost they can't control. The climax of this act pushes Superior Iron Man and Doom into direct combat. It's the battle fans have been waiting for. Robert Downey Jr. versus Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man versus Doom, intellect versus will. The choreography isn't just about who has the stronger armor, it's about who can outthink the other, who can twist reality or technology to gain the upper hand. Doom reshapes terrain mid-battle, turning solid ground into traps. Superior Iron Man counters with adaptive nanotech that learns and evolves with each strike. It's a duel not just of power, but of philosophy. Each man embodying a different extreme of Tony Stark's potential. And the Avengers, caught in the middle, have to decide whether to intervene or let the two destroy each other. By the end of this act, the Avengers are left shattered, bloodied, and more uncertain than ever. Doom and Superior Iron Man have battered each other nearly to the point of exhaustion, but neither is willing to concede. The multiverse itself trembles under their clash, threatening to unravel completely. And here's the kicker. The Avengers realize that even if they somehow stop Doom, they'll immediately have to contend with Superior Iron Man, who's already begun to declare himself the true savior of reality. That's the impossible choice they face as the act closes. Do they gamble everything on a Tony Stark they can't trust, or do they risk letting Doom reshape the multiverse in his image? Either way, the cost will be unbearable. At this point, the air in Battleworld would feel electric, charged with desperation, grief, and sheer chaos. Watching Doom and Superior Iron Man tear into each other, I can't help but see this as the embodiment of everything Tony Stark represented, split down the middle into two extremes. On one side, Doom wields power born from loss, using grief as justification for control. On the other, Superior Iron Man believes only in ruthless logic and ambition, determined to prove that his version of Tony is the inevitable evolution of the man who once sacrificed himself in Endgame. The Avengers stand between them, but they're fractured, exhausted, and out of time. The multiverse itself groans under the weight of their battle. Universes colliding, fragments of alternate realities crashing into one another, threatening to tear everything apart. It's here that the Avengers realize they don't just need to stop Doom or Superior Iron Man, they need to stop both. And that realization doesn't come easily. Up until now, they've leaned heavily on Superior Iron Man for survival, watching him dismantle Doom's traps and armies with ruthless efficiency. But as the dust clears from his duel with Doom, his words betray his true intentions. He declares himself the rightful savior, insisting that Doom is just a broken tyrant while he, Superior Iron Man, is the future. To him, the Avengers are pawns, and their loyalty is a means to an end. That's when the team finally sees the truth. This Tony isn't their friend. He isn't even a hero. He's a man who would burn down the multiverse to prove he's the one who should be in charge of rebuilding it. And for me, that moment hits harder than any punch or blast of repulsor fire, because it's the Avengers finally letting go of the hope that somewhere in this multiverse they might find their Tony again. He's gone, and this variant only proves how irreplaceable he was. So the Avengers rally, broken and bloody but not finished. They know the odds are impossible, but they also know that if they don't act now, they'll lose everything to one of these two men. Strange starts weaving protective spells to hold collapsing fragments of reality at bay. Thor summons the raw fury of a dying star, and Wanda, still haunted by the illusions Doom has dangled in front of her, turns her grief into a weapon against him. Every member of the team throws everything they have left into this final confrontation, not because they expect to win outright, but because they need to buy even a sliver of opportunity to reset the multiverse before it implodes completely. This leads to what I think would be the emotional heart of the finale. The idea that Tony Stark's legacy is not just about sacrifice, but about choice. Doom represents what happens when grief dictates choice. Superior Iron Man represents what happens when arrogance dictates choice. But the Tony Stark we knew, the one who snapped his fingers in Endgame, was defined by choosing to put others above himself. And I think it's through that lens that the Avengers find their final strategy. They can't outmuscle Doom, and they can't outthink Superior Iron Man. But they can remind the multiverse of the Tony Stark who chose to be a hero. In a poetic twist, I imagine Strange and Wanda tapping into the remnants of their universe, conjuring a fragment of the Tony Stark they lost, not a physical resurrection, but an echo of his sacrifice, a vision of the man who saved everything. It's not Tony returned in the flesh, but it's his legacy made manifest, and that's enough to shake both Doom and Superior Iron Man. For Doom, seeing the echo of the selfless Tony drives home the futility of his vengeance. He lost his family because of an incursion, but his rage has only destroyed more lives and left him further from healing. For Superior Iron Man, the vision is even more devastating. It's a reminder that no matter how much power or brilliance he amasses, he'll never be the Tony Stark who made the ultimate choice. It breaks through his arrogance in a way nothing else could. And for the Avengers, it becomes the symbol they desperately needed, that their Tony may be gone, but what he stood for is still guiding them, still saving them, even in death. The climax comes when the Avengers seize this moment of hesitation. Strange channels the collapsing energy of Battleworld into a single spell, designed not to destroy, but to reset. Wanda amplifies it, Thor feeds it power, and together they create the spark that unravels Battleworld from within. But it requires one last push. Someone has to direct the collapsing energy at the exact right moment. And in a final ironic twist, it's Superior Iron Man who steps forward. Not out of selflessness, but out of pride. He declares that if anyone is going to end this, it will be him. For a brief instant, he mirrors the Tony Stark we knew, raising his hand and channeling the energy into Doom, obliterating his hold over Battleworld and shattering the patchwork reality apart. It's not redemption, not really, but it's enough. Doom is defeated. Battleworld collapses and the multiverse stabilizes. The aftermath is bittersweet. The Avengers survive, but they know they've lost far more than they've won. Doom is gone. Superior Iron Man is erased with the collapse of Battleworld, and Tony Stark, any version of him, is truly gone. What remains is the echo of his sacrifice, the memory of the man who chose to save everyone, even when he didn't have to. And for the team, that's both heartbreaking and healing. They finally accept that Tony's story ended in Endgame, and while they may encounter infinite versions of him across the multiverse, none will ever be their Tony. That acceptance becomes the emotional closure they needed, even as the MCU moves into its next phase. And that's why I think this leaked script theory resonates so strongly. It's not just about bringing Robert Downey Jr. back for shock value. It's about exploring the consequences of Tony Stark's choices, both good and bad, and showing us why his sacrifice mattered. By pitting him against himself, Marvel could give us a story that's both epic in scale and deeply personal in theme. A story where Iron Man's legacy defines not just the Avengers but the fate of the entire multiverse. And honestly, that's the kind of storytelling that makes me excited for Secret Wars. So, if you've stuck with me through this breakdown, thank you for diving deep into this insane theory with me. I'm Liam Harrison, and this has been MovieCast. If you enjoyed this kind of in-depth exploration, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and this is important, try out YouTube's new hype feature. It's completely free, and it's one of the best ways to show your support and boost videos like this so more fans can join in the conversation. And if you want to go the extra mile, we've just unlocked super thanks on the channel, so if you're feeling generous, consider dropping a $20 super thanks to directly support what we do here. Either way, your support means the world, and it's what lets me keep digging into theories like this one. Until next time, stay hyped, and I'll see you in the next breakdown.